Hello. Okay, so in the spirit of starting to do these more while in the midst of work, right now I am in the parish hall marking off squares of possible socially distanced locations, which would require masking, which would require both the back and the front doors of the parish hall to be open so that there was cross flow from the outside, and would be sealed off from the rest of the building, and lots of precautions. We're not going to do anything casually or without guidance from the local health department, which has been awesome in helping all of us think better about this in our own city. But in the midst of doing all of that, I am here to talk to you about the discipline of tradition. And this is a hard one to talk about. When I was writing about it in my second book, it really took me a while to figure out what I was trying to say, because on the one hand, I don't really want to talk about this in terms of the way it's used in some other places where the discipline of tradition essentially means something to the effect of just studying. I want to talk about study a little bit next week, but that's not quite what I mean by the discipline of tradition. But it's also not about necessarily knowing church history, because that can be a part of study. So, what is meant? What is meant by this thing when I say the discipline of tradition? I think it's something like this. I think it is a cultivated awareness that in our denomination, we do not exist as if we were born yesterday. We have an inherited set of beliefs, but we also have an inherited way of doing things. So the word tradition, if you break it down to its roots, comes from the Latin word tradere, which means sort of essentially to hand down, though you can apply it in some other ways as well. But the handing down is the work. And so tradition is the handing down of the things that have come before. Well, what's getting handed down? On the one hand, some of the things we're handing down are really good, and they're really meaningful, and they're really lovely. And on the other hand, we might be handing down some stuff that's like not great, not very good, not very lovely. Maybe needs some unpacking and some reevaluation. So when we talk about something like the discipline of tradition, I think we have to start with the caveat, which is tradition itself is neutral. It's both good and bad. It's going to have some good things, it's going to have some bad things. Tradition in and of itself is not this pure thing. Okay, so we've made our caveat. What about it? Well, when we're thinking about something like the discipline of tradition, what we should be thinking about is, how do I tell the story of where I find myself in the larger story of the church? That's what we're really asking. We're asking the question of, I am involved in this thing that Jesus has established, and my life is integrated into the life of this place, but I will leave a legacy too. I will be a part of this story, just like I have inherited something. I will be handing something down, whether or not I mean to. And so how does that play itself out? Well, it plays itself out usually in two ways. One is that if you're young, if you're in my generation, you tend to have a bit of a bad time wanting to tell all of the generations that came before us that they got it all wrong, and we're here to fix it and to solve it for them. And look, there's some stuff that needs to get changed. That's fair. But there's a lot of stuff that's actually pretty good. But you usually hear this come out in things like somebody giving a sermon in which they very dramatically exhort the older generation into just needing to stop being so lazy, or if they had just taken Jesus seriously enough, or if they, and that's really unfair and really unkind. But on the flip side, Older generations also have a tendency to say, but we've always done it this way, and any suggestion of changing that is a violation, a fundamental violation of what, other than just tradition. It's not very clear, but okay, there we go. One of my favorite lines in all of Scripture is from Paul when he says, "What do you have that you did not receive?" He's writing to one of the churches, and he's basically making the case that's like, you know what you know because somebody handed it down to you first. So the discipline of tradition is also essentially a discipline of humility. What do I mean when I say discipline of tradition? I mean being able to tell the story as you being within the story, not as somebody who's standing on the outside of it. And there it is. There's the big point. In order to make commentary on the tradition, you got to be within it. You can't be on the outside. Because if you're on the outside commenting on it, you're just being critical. But if you're within the tradition, if you're within the spirit of the thing, you're giving yourself an opportunity to be shaped by it and respond to it. Respond to the shaping. Wow, that's very abstract. What does any of that mean? Well, it means something like this. It means that if you want to talk about things that you disagree with in church, you got to first start by asking, where is this in the tradition? You got to think about really critically, like, well, is there a reason why these things might be okay? Or is there a reason why I have disagreements over this, that I am within a tradition that says some things are okay and other traditions say they're not? I mean, it's no big secret. Episcopalians say that some things are okay that other Christian traditions don't say are okay. Well, if you're an Episcopal church, it's probably worth interrogating. Are you willing to be Episcopalian? Right? I mean, if we're an Episcopal church in the Episcopal tradition and we have received this tradition, it has been handed down to us and it's now ours to do something with, we probably first have to spend some time being shaped by it before we make commentary on it, or being shaped by it and really figuring out whether or not this is the place that Jesus has called us to. So here's, I think, a pretty easy example. You might hear something in church and you think, oh, I don't like that. I don't like that at all. And then you open up your catechism and you start reading it through and it's there. That's something to think about. Or you hear a sermon that makes you brusque a little bit and you're like, I don't know about all that. I don't really like that language. But then you really pay attention to the prayers that we are praying and the prayers of the people. And you might think, well, if I'm praying that, the discipline of tradition is really a discipline about paying attention. We're not congregationalists. We're not people who sit in a room together and say, let's vote on the best idea. We are beholden to things. We're beholden to the councils of the church. We're beholden to the scriptures. We're beholden to the Book of Common Prayer in its many iterations. We are beholden to one another. We're beholden to our bishops and our priests and our deacons and our lay ministers and just anyone within our midst. But fundamentally, in a rooted sense, we are first and foremost bound to Jesus as Jesus has chosen to direct his church. So what do we do with that? It's hard. It's a hard thing to think about because it's very big and it's not exactly the most practical thing in terms of how you could apply it on a day-to-day basis. So I want to ease off the homework for this week kind of thing. Instead, what I invite you to think about as next week, we're going to move into talking about study. And the week after that, we're going to talk about devotion. And we're going to talk about praying with icons and what that looks like and what that means. Just take a moment this week and think about this very simple question. And maybe, okay, there it is. I found the homework. Talk to Jesus about this. Why has Jesus called you to express your Christianity and to follow him in the Episcopal Church? What is it about being Episcopalian that Jesus is calling you to? Not what you like, not the things that you enjoy or the friends you have or anything else, but just talking to Jesus about why am I at an Episcopal church? And ask questions like, have I really committed to its tradition? Have I gotten confirmed? If you haven't gotten confirmed and you want to be, let us know. We will make it happen. Because grafting yourself to a tradition gives you the permission to be formed by it and to change it. Because what we receive is the thing we are also going to do something with so that we can hand it down ourselves. But if you stand on the outside of it, you're not really allowing Jesus to do the work from within it. So, something to think about. Episcopal identity. Wasn't totally sure that's where we were going to take this one, but we're at about just over 10 minutes, and that's usually where we're done, and so we've arrived at a thing. So, I am going to go finish doing Altar Guild stuff. I will see you all digitally on Sunday or here next week. Take some time. Ask Jesus, the Good Shepherd, why he led you to this particular green pasture. If it is the place that is to restore your soul, why here? And then we'll talk next week about how to do some work with that. All right. Bye.